welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today, our program bringing you all the latest news and events happening all around the African continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'll be joining you this afternoon, and as usual we go straight to a look at some of the news making the headlines, starting with Sudan, where the government reached an agreement with tribal protesters to allow the resumption of exports of landlocked South Sudan's crude oil via a terminal on the Red Sea. Sudanese Energy and Oil Ministry warned that the port's oil depots would become full up on 10 days' time if the blockage continued. We have more details in this story.
Protesters from the Beja tribes in eastern Sudan demonstrating against what they say is a lack of political power and poor economic conditions in the region have been blocking roads and forcing Red Sea ports to close in recent weeks. The ruling council in Sudan said a government delegation headed by a member of the ruling Sovereign Council met tribal elders on Sunday and secured a deal to allow oil exports from the Bashayr port. The council did not disclose the terms of the agreement or give further details. The Sudanese Energy and Oil Ministry warned on Saturday that their port's oil depots would become full up in 10 days' time if the blockage continued. That would in turn force South Sudanese oil fields to halt production. The protesters have also forced the closure of a pipeline that carries imported crude to the capital Khartoum.
And continuing with our news, as Africa records more than 8.3 million COVID-19 cases, the continent continues to suffer from a severe shortage of vaccines. At the UN General Assembly last week, African countries pushed for unity and criticized vaccine inequality. We have more details in the story.
As Africa records more than 8.3 million COVID-19 cases, the continent continues to suffer from a severe shortage of vaccines. Less than 4% of the continent has been fully vaccinated, and fewer doses are expected to be delivered through COVAX after the UN sharing mechanism announced that it is forced to slash planned COVID-19 vaccine deliveries to Africa by 150 million doses this year. At the UN General Assembly last week, African countries pushed for unity and criticized vaccine inequality. Stephen Neary, Africa Regional Director at Project Hope, said 18 months is enough time to learn lessons. Today, he said, it is well understood that as long as the virus spreads and mutates in some parts of the world, no place will be safe. He said ending the COVID-19 pandemic should be a global top priority. It cannot be addressed country by country. Many high-income countries have already vaccinated more than 75% of their populations, while at least 14 African countries have not even immunized 1% of their respective populations.
And for our final news item, investment of some $280 billion will be needed to combat the effects of climate change in 35 cities, including South Africa, Kenya and Ethiopia, by 2050. The figures came in a report published by the Coalition for Urban Transitions, which advises governments on economic development and global warming. We have more details in this story.
With its urban population exploding 20-fold between 1950 and 2015, Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent and also the hardest hit by climate change. In new research by the Coalition for Urban Transitions, which advises governments on economic development and global warming, warned against the impact of climate change in Africa. It said a further 950 million people are expected to live in African cities by 2050, which experts say will make efficient urban planning hugely problematic. It said African cities need to adapt urgently to rapid urbanization and climate change, urging governments to unlock investment in African cities to accelerate climate-resilient growth. The report looked at how climate and urban challenges can be addressed so that African cities are put on a path of sustainable long-term development. It found South Africa would need $215 billion in investment in its cities, while Kenya would need $27 billion and Ethiopia $42 billion. South Sudan's returnee farmers yearn for peace to revive food production. The report said 3 pillars will be crucial for low-carbon, climate-resilient urban development: compact urban growth, connected infrastructure, and clean technologies. In recent years, unusually strong cyclones have struck Africa's southeast coast, while droughts have parched southern Africa and floods and landslides have hit the Horn of Africa. Cape Town, South Africa's second largest city, almost ran out of water in 2018.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to be joined over the telephone by Dr. Sayed Nasr, the climate change consultant. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor. Now, first and foremost, how do you describe the latest report stating that billions of dollars are needed to save different African cities from climate change problems in the future?
I think Africa and the African cities are very poor regarding the electrification and the ability to have lighting by electricity and the energy. And that's why the urbanization also in Africa, in order to make a real resilient urbanization, you have to use the clean energy, clean technologies with low emission of the GHG, of greenhouse gases. And that's why by the way, Africa continent is considered as a dark continent with only 3 spots. One in the east, it's Egypt. One in the west, it's Morocco. And one in the south is South Africa. And this is not good for Africa. Africa it needs more energy and needs more billions of dollars in order to electrify the cities in Africa and also the rural areas. So I think Africa is considered one of the continents that need a very high aid and help from the international community in order to assist Africa to go through the green world, to go through the development, but sustainable development, not only just development.
Right. Doctor, speaking about development, let's talk a bit about the impact of economic development on African countries in terms of urbanization. Of course, this is very important for African countries in the economic sense, but how has this affected their climate and the climate change in their countries?
For the time being, and under the threat and impacts of climate change on Africa, we cannot speak about development in Africa only. We have to speak about sustainable development.
Yes.
Not only development or economic development. Economic development without taking into consideration the environmental aspects and the social aspects, it's more harmful on Africa more than being a development. Africa should go through the pathway of sustainable development. It means that they need clean technologies, they need low carbon technologies, renewable energies, and by the way, Africa is very rich with the solar energy. I mean, we have the long hours of sunlight, and they just only to assist and to help Africa in order to go through the solar energy, also the wind energy and the bioenergy. All types of renewable energy are very helpful to Africa to go through the sustainable development using the clean technologies with low emissions.
Yes, indeed. Now, Doctor, you spoke a bit about the effects of economic development and how it needs to be looked at holistically as sustainable. development. Now, new research has shown that urban populations are expected to explode 20 times between 1950 and 2050. We're expecting more than 950 million more people are expected to live in African cities by 2050. How can governments deal with this upcoming population explosion in their countries? How can they prepare in such a way that they preserve, their environment and further prevent more global warming and climatic changes from affecting their nations?
We are seeing for the time being that more of the rural population migrate towards the cities and towards the urban cities. And this is very, very dangerous. And as you mentioned, they may come to explosion of this population. So the way is to encourage the rural population in order to go through the sustainable development, and they should be assisted, of course, with the clean technologies in agriculture, in the industry, and in order to make their houses, I mean their buildings, green buildings, and in such way also giving them jobs in the rural areas, and in such a way we can decrease, not prevent, but at least decrease the rate of migration of those people from the rural areas towards the urban cities.
Yes, indeed. Doctor, the Coalition for Urban Transitions has urged governments in Africa to unlock investments in cities to accelerate climate resilient growth. How would you elaborate on this term, climate resilient growth? What do African countries need to do in order to prevent more climate changes from affecting them, especially with regards to climate resilient economic growth?
Climate resilient economic growth is very important.
Yes.
It means that these cities also and the rural areas, when they make their economic growth, they do that with steps taken into consideration. These steps should be done with a very careful way.
Yes.
The rural areas should be, as I mentioned, should be assisted and encouraged to do the business in the rural areas in order to attract the people to stay in the rural areas by giving them projects and creating jobs for the youth. And in such case, we go through the sustainable development and decrease the burden on the cities, because now the cities cannot continue like that.
Right. You spoke about the issue of climate resilient growth, and the issue of green transformation has been really recently the limelight for many developing nations in Africa. How would you describe the role of green transformation on climate change in the African continent as a whole?
By the way, the word green transition or green development is the same way like climate resilience, because the green climate transition is the way, or the green economy is the way to achieve the sustainable development.
Yes.
That's in simple way. All the activities of green economy are the way to pave the way towards achieving the sustainable development.
Absolutely.
It means make these societies are resilient society towards the impacts of climate change, and also towards sharing the efforts to decrease the greenhouse gases and also to mitigate the climate change impact.
Absolutely. Dr. Said, let's talk finally about a very important issue, which is that of global warming. Now, lots of countries worldwide, not just in Africa, are suffering from global warming and what it has done to the climates in their countries. This year, we've seen unprecedented forest fires. We've seen flooding, we've seen very cold weather, lots of climatic changes that are unexpected for specific parts all around the world. How can African nations prepare themselves and prevent such phenomenon from hitting their countries?
The global warming is the global phenomenon.
Yes.
This is the effect of the emissions from all the different parts around the Earth, and the greenhouse gas are accumulated in the atmosphere,
Yes.
and they start to increase the average temperature of the Earth, and in such case, all these impacts, which we call it climate change impacts, like flooding, like desertification, like extreme events, all these types affect many countries and many continents. But Africa is the most affected continent all over the world because it has many areas as a desert. I mean, there's also the water resources are scarce, and the countries are poor and underdeveloped. They cannot withstand the impact of climate change because they are not, by the way, they are not the reason of these emissions because they have no development, and in the same time, they are the most affected people. They are the most affected continent by the climate change impact. That's why this is the problem for the UNFCCC, I mean, the United Nations framework of climate change. Mentioned this issue that Africa needs a huge amount of money, of loans and of money and the technologies in order to assist Africa to withstand and to address the effects of climate change.
Absolutely right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today's episode. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Dr. Syed Nosri, the climate change consultant. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and your insight. And with this, we wrap up today's episode of Africa Today. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.